Here is something almost no one will say out loud inside a 7-minute appointment. The number that flashes up on the blood pressure cuff is not your blood pressure. Sit with that for a second. It sounds wrong. You watched the machine. You saw the number appear with your own eyes, in clean digital figures. And a machine cannot lie to you. You are right. The machine is not lying. But that number is only true for a single instant, under one exact set of conditions, and those conditions are almost never the ones that actually describe your heart. The cuff is honest. The moment it caught you in is the problem. For a great many people past 60, that one honest number has done something quietly serious. It has handed them a label they may not deserve, and sometimes a pill bottle to go along with the label. There is no villain in that story. A rushed room is just a rushed room. But a system built for speed was never built for accuracy, and the cost of that lands on your kitchen table, not theirs. So tonight I am going to give you the time the appointment did not. By the end, you will understand why your real blood pressure might be a very different number than the one that frightened you, and exactly how to find out which. One quick note first. If part of your blood pressure picture is extra fluid your body is holding on to, and for some people over 60 it is, the gentle starting routine I put together, the drainage protocol, is linked below. It is one small lever, not a treatment, and never a reason to skip your doctor. That is all I will say about it. Back to the number. Let me say plainly what almost everyone believes, because it is not a foolish belief. It is a completely reasonable one. You believe that when the cuff reads 150/90, your blood pressure is 150/90. You believe a high number means high blood pressure. And you believe that if the number stays high, the next step is a prescription. None of that is stupid. For some people, every single word of it is true, and I will come back to those people near the end, because what I am about to explain does not apply to them. And getting that part wrong could genuinely hurt someone. But for millions of others, the belief is not wrong so much as it is incomplete. And the missing piece happens to be the most important piece of all. Here is why the belief took such a firm hold. A number feels honest. It has no opinions. It does not flatter you. It does not frighten you on purpose. It simply appears in those clean, glowing figures, and clean figures feel like hard facts. On top of that, the person reading it usually wears a white coat, and you have been taught your entire life to trust that coat. So when the machine and the coat agree, who are you to argue with both at once? That instinct is a good one. I am not asking you to throw it out. I am asking you to add a single idea to it. And once it is in your head, you will never look at the cuff the same way again. Before the idea, let me name what actually happens to you, because I think it has happened to a lot of you watching. You go in feeling fine. You feel like yourself. The cuff goes on, the number comes up high, and the mood in the room changes. Suddenly there are words like hypertension and risk, and we should keep an eye on this. You walked in healthy and you walk out with a condition. One reading did that. And from there it tends to snowball. A follow-up, then maybe a low dose of something, then a slightly higher dose, then the lightheadedness when you stand too fast, and the quiet worry every time you feel your own heartbeat at night. All of it can begin with a single number caught in a single bad moment. You deserve to know whether that moment was telling the truth. And here is a quiet detail almost no one is ever told. The real definition of high blood pressure is not a high number. It is a high number at rest. The condition is defined by what your pressure does when your body is calm and settled, not by what it does after you rushed across a parking lot and climbed onto a table. So the very moment most readings are taken is the one moment the definition tells us not to lean on by itself. Hold on to that. We will come back to it. So here is the idea. The conditions around the measurement can move that number more than your actual heart does. Let me give you real figures, because vague hand-waving helps no one. These come from the American Heart Association's own work on measurement error, and I want you to picture each one happening in an ordinary appointment. Wrapping the cuff over a sleeve instead of bare skin can add up to 50 points to the reading. 50. That one mistake alone can lift a perfectly normal person into a frightening range. Why does it do that? Because the fabric bunches under the cuff and changes how the pressure presses on the artery underneath, and the machine reads that interference as if it were your blood. A full bladder can push the number up by another 10 to 15 points. That sounds almost silly, But there is a real reason. When your bladder is full, it gently switches on that same stress and alarm system in the body, the one that tightens your vessels. So simply needing the bathroom, which you almost always do after sitting in a waiting room, nudges your pressure up before the cuff even moves. Letting your arm dangle at your side or holding it up in the air instead of resting it supported at the level of your heart can add as much as 10 points because your heart has to fight a little harder against gravity and the machine counts that extra effort. Crossing your legs at the knee or slouching with your back unsupported adds another 6 to 10. Crossing your legs squeezes the large vessels behind the knee and makes your body work harder to push blood through, which raises the number on the spot. Talking during the reading, even friendly small talk, even just listening to a question, can add around 10 points. And a cuff that is simply too small for a larger arm adds 2 to 10 on top of everything else, because it has to squeeze harder to do its job, and the machine mistakes that squeeze for pressure. And some of these do not wash out as quickly as you would hope. Take coffee. Caffeine does not just nudge your pressure for a moment. Once it is in your system, it can keep your vessels tightened for a couple of hours, and no amount of deep breathing in the waiting room will undo it. So the morning coffee at 8, the appointment at 9, and the high reading at 9:15 are not three separate facts. They are one chain. The same is true of a cigarette beforehand, or a brisk rush to make it on time. The body remembers the exertion long after you have sat down. Now do the arithmetic in your head. You do not need every one of those errors. You need 2 or 3, and 2 or 3 is not a worst case. It is an ordinary Tuesday at a busy clinic. Picture it. You park, you walk in, you sit in the waiting room with a full bladder. They call your name, you walk down a hall, you climb up onto the table. The cuff goes on over your sleeve. Your arm rests in your lap, below your heart, not supported. And while it inflates, someone asks how your week has been. And of course, you answer. That is the sleeve, the bladder, the dropped arm, and the talking. 4 errors, stacked, before the number even finishes appearing. That is not a small wobble. That is the entire distance between you are fine and you have a disease. There is one research figure that should genuinely stop you cold. A consensus document published in the Journal of Hypertension estimated that a measurement error of just 5 points, 5, could shove roughly 84 million people around the world into the wrong blood pressure category. 5 points is the width of a full bladder. It is a sleeve left rolled down. It is the price of one skipped step. And it is not only technique, it is the place itself. Here is a myth worth retiring. The myth is that your body behaves the same in the exam room as it does at home. It does not. For a large number of people, blood pressure simply runs higher inside a medical office than it ever does in their own living room. The body's alarm system reacts to the setting itself, the white coat, the paper gown, the waiting, the worry about what they might find. The reading is real. It is just measuring your nerves as much as your arteries. This has a name. It is called white coat hypertension, which means high in the office, normal in ordinary life. And it is not rare, especially in our age group. In one study of older adults living in their own communities, the white coat pattern showed up in nearly half of them, and it was particularly common among people in their 70s. Other research found that office readings ran higher than properly taken home readings by around 7 to 8 points on the top number alone. And here is the figure that matters most. Among people flagged with a high reading in the office, studies suggest that up to 1 in 3 may not have sustained high blood pressure at all once they are measured correctly outside that room. 1 in 3. That is not a rounding error. That is millions of people walking around with a diagnosis the room handed them. A common scene plays out in clinics every single day. Someone in their late 60s, feeling perfectly well, comes in for some unrelated reason. The cuff reads high once, no one waited 5 minutes, no one checked the sleeve, and by the time they leave, there is a new word in their chart and a new bottle in their bag, built entirely on that one moment. It is nobody's idea of bad medicine. It is just the speed of a busy day, quietly making a decision that a week of home numbers might have overturned. If no one has ever sat you down and explained any of this, that is exactly why this channel exists. Subscribe and we keep pulling threads like this one until they come all the way loose. Now, Before you swing too far the other way and decide the office number is always too high, I owe you the other half of the truth, because it keeps you safe. There is a mirror image of white coat hypertension, and it is sneakier. It is called masked hypertension. That is when your office reading looks perfectly normal, but your blood pressure is actually high the rest of the time, out in your real life where no one is measuring. White coat fools you into thinking you are sick. Masked fools you into thinking you are well. And the masked kind is, if anything, more dangerous, precisely because everyone relaxes. This is the whole reason I am not telling you to trust the office number less and your gut more. I am telling you to trust the pattern measured properly over time. The pattern is the only honest witness. There is one more habit I have to warn you about, and it may be the most consequential of all. It is the one reading diagnosis. You walk in, the cuff reads high once, and a decision gets made on the spot, sometimes a decision that follows you for the rest of your life. But a single reading was never meant to diagnose anything on its own. The major guidelines are built around readings taken on more than one occasion, often across separate days, precisely because of everything we have just covered. A real diagnosis is the average of many moments, not the sentence of one. Here is the simplest way I can put it. One high reading is a single wave. It tells you the sea can rise. It does not tell you the sea is high. To know the sea, you have to watch it long enough to see the tide itself, and not just the one wave that happened to break while someone was looking. So if the number on the cuff is not your blood pressure, then what is? To answer that honestly, you have to understand one thing about your own body that no single reading can ever show you. Your blood pressure is not a fixed value. It is never one number. It is a tide. Picture the ocean. The sea has a depth, but if I asked you how deep the ocean is, the only honest answer is that it depends on when you look. The tide rises and falls all day long, pulled by the moon, pushed around by wind and storms. Now imagine you walked down to the shore at the exact peak of high tide, in the middle of a gale, measured the water against a post, and then went home and painted that one number on a sign by the road. This is the depth of the sea. You would be wrong about that ocean for nearly every other hour of the day. Your blood pressure does exactly the same thing. It rises the moment you stand up. It climbs when the phone startles you. It surges when you carry groceries up the stairs. And then it sinks down low and quiet in the deep middle of the night while you sleep. That rising and falling is not a malfunction. It is your body doing its job, second by second, through what is called the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight machinery that speeds your heart and tightens your blood vessels the instant your body senses any kind of stress. So think about what that machinery is doing in a clinic. The cold walk from the car is a gust of wind on the water. The crowded waiting room is another. Climbing onto the table, even that small effort of holding yourself upright, lifts the tide. The worry about the bill, the result, the weight, every bit of it is weather on the sea. By the time the cuff inflates, you are being measured at high tide, in a storm, and the number it captures is completely real. It is simply not the ocean. There is even a rhythm to all of this across the day. In most people, blood pressure climbs in the hours around waking, a natural morning surge as the body switches itself on for the day, and then it eases down through the evening and falls lowest in the small hours of the night. That daily rise and fall is normal and expected. It is one more reason a single reading at one time of day can mislead you. Morning you and midnight you can carry noticeably different numbers, and both of them are honestly, truly yours. That single idea, that your pressure is a tide and not a fixed line, is the thing the 7-minute appointment never has time to tell you. And now comes the part that turns this whole thing around, because the very same idea tells you exactly when a high number is not a measurement quirk but a true emergency unfolding in slow motion. Real high blood pressure, the kind that genuinely grinds down your heart, your kidneys, and your eyes over the years, is not a single high tide. It is when the water stays high even at low tide. Read that with me again, because it is the whole video. True high blood pressure is high in the morning before you have moved. It is high in the evening on the couch. It is high when you are calm, rested, and home, with nothing in the world frightening you. When the sea simply never goes back down, when even the quietest hour of your day still reads high, that is no longer a measurement problem. That is the real thing. And the real thing does not get better by being ignored. it gets worse, in silence, which is exactly why it earned its old nickname as a silent condition. So the goal was never to talk you out of caring about your blood pressure. The goal is to stop you from being sentenced on the strength of one high tide, and to make absolutely sure that if the water really is staying high, you are the one who catches it. And catching it matters more than almost anything else you can do for yourself at this age. Quietly high pressure, year after year, is one of the leading reasons people end up with a stroke they never saw coming, or a heart that slowly stops keeping up, or kidneys that quietly fade. None of that announces itself in advance. It simply accumulates. That is why measuring honestly is not about fear at all. It is about catching the one thing that does its damage without ever asking your permission. So here is what to actually do. Because understanding the tide only helps if you can learn to read it yourself, on your own shore, on your own schedule. The aim is simple. Stop judging your heart by one number taken at high tide in a stressful room. Start watching the whole pattern over many days where you actually live. First, get a home monitor, the kind with a cuff that wraps around your upper arm, not the wrist kind. Many of the wrist devices run looser and less reliable. Look for one that has been independently validated for accuracy. Your pharmacist can point you toward a trustworthy model, and it is worth asking by name. Then prepare the way the American Heart Association lays it out, and notice that nearly every step is really about letting the tide settle. For the 30 minutes before, no coffee, no cigarettes, no exercise. All three of those temporarily raise the water. Empty your bladder, since a full one quietly lifts the number. Then sit somewhere calm and do nothing at all for 5 full minutes. People skip this step constantly, and it may be the single most important one. You are waiting for the wind to die down, for that fight or flight system to go quiet. When you are ready, sit with your back supported against the chair and both feet flat on the floor. Do not cross your legs. Roll your sleeve up and rest the cuff on bare skin, with the bottom edge just above the bend of your elbow. Lay your arm on a table so the cuff sits level with your heart. Slide a cushion underneath if you need the height. And then comes the hardest part for most of us. Be quiet. No talking, no phone, no television you are half following. Let the machine do its work in silence. Take 2 readings, 1 minute apart. Do that in the morning, before you take any medication, and again in the evening. Use the same arm each time, so you are comparing like with like. Write each number down or let the monitor store them in its memory. And do it for several days running, not a single day, because one reading at home is still just one moment too. What you are building is not a snapshot. It is a chart of your tide across a whole week. Then carry that chart into your next appointment. A page of home numbers, taken properly over several days, tells a far truer story than one rushed reading on an exam table. It is honestly the most useful thing you can bring through that door. It changes the conversation from the machine says you are sick into here is what my heart actually does all week long, and that is a completely different conversation, one where you are a partner instead of a verdict. And do not let a single odd number rattle you. If one reading jumps for no clear reason, breathe, wait a couple of minutes, and take it again. You are looking for the trend across the week, not reacting to every wave. A home monitor is a tool for patience, not for panic. Many people who start measuring this way find their numbers are steadier and lower than the office ever suggested, for the simple reason that the storm of the clinic is gone. Red flag. Now I have to be very clear about something, because everything I have said could be misheard, and mishearing it could hurt you. I am not telling you that high blood pressure is a myth. I am not telling you to wave off a high number. And I am absolutely not telling you to stop or change any medication on your own. High blood pressure is real, it is common, and left unwatched, it is one of the great quiet drivers of stroke, heart failure, and kidney damage. Everything tonight has been about measuring it honestly, never about dismissing it. So, here is the bright line. If your numbers keep coming back high, high in the morning, high at night, high when you are rested and calm and home, then this is not the white coat, and it is not your sleeve or your bladder. That is your real tide, and it is genuinely high, and that is a reason to see your doctor, not a reason to relax. Properly measured high numbers have earned your full attention. And there is one reading that is a flat emergency. If you ever measure around 180 over 120 or higher, sit, rest a few minutes, and measure once more. If it stays up there, call your doctor right away. And if a number that high arrives alongside chest pain, shortness of breath, trouble speaking, sudden weakness, or changes in your vision, do not retest and do not wait. Call emergency services immediately. That is not a night for home monitoring. And once more, as plainly as I can put it, do not change a single medication based on your home readings without talking to the person who prescribed it. Bring them the numbers. Let the two of you decide together. The home chart exists to inform that conversation, never to replace it. Now, I want to hear from you because this genuinely shapes what I work on next. Tell me your decade in the comments. Are you in your 60s, your 70s, or your 80s? The white coat pattern leans differently as the years go on. It shows up more in some decades than in others, and knowing who is actually on the other side of this changes which of these warnings I lean on hardest. So drop it below. Just the decade is plenty. Here is what I want you to carry out of this. The cuff is a witness, not a judge. It can tell you, honestly, what it saw in one single moment. But one moment, in a stressful room with your sleeve down and your legs crossed and a question hanging in the air, is not a verdict on your heart. You are allowed to ask for the measurement to be done properly. You are allowed to come back with a week of your own numbers in your hand. And you are allowed to know the difference between one high tide and a sea that never goes down. Most people are never told that difference even exists. Now you have been. So go and watch your own tide. And make sure that whatever gets decided about your heart gets decided on the truth, and not on one stormy afternoon.